and thank you for your time. My name is Mahesh Nafde. I'm Global Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences at STAR. I'm with STAR for now almost a year and have been with healthcare life sciences for 25 plus years. In my tenure, I have worked with payers, providers, diagnostic labs, medtech companies, pharmas, and CROs. So a fair bit of experience across the industry. I'm also joined by my colleague, Martin Fix. Martin, would you take just a moment to introduce yourself?
Yes, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Martin Fix. I'm working with STAR since 5 years now in a role called Technology Director, which means I'm the techie representing all our engineering capabilities. I'm a computer scientist by education, and I spent about 30 years in the business nowadays, having a lot of delivery responsibility in the industry, and now working with STAR on consultancy to help others to deliver. It's a pleasure to meet you and looking forward towards the end section as well, where we have Q&A to discuss any details you're interested in.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate it. Martin is based in Berlin. I am based in North Carolina in the US. All right, so before we get into the content, first, let me tell you how we are going to conduct the session today. We will run it in two parts. Part one, for about 20, 30 minutes, I will walk you through the problem statement, establish how pervasive this problem is with some real-life examples, the magnitude of the problem, and then conclude with a solution, how we plan to address or how we are addressing that problem. And at the end, I'll introduce you to living apps and the technology behind it. But then Martin will take over after that for about 10, 15 minutes and then give you a demo and explain the technology in detail behind it. In my session, I'll also conduct two short polls just to make sure I didn't put everybody to sleep. I'm just kidding. Just want to make sure I get to know the audience a bit better and tailor my side of the story. All right? And then we'll conclude with the questions. Fair? All right. So before I jump into the topic, the living apps, I have to do my job, or I wouldn't do my job if I don't cover who is STAR, what is STAR. So do a quick introduction there. So who is STAR? STAR is a global technology consulting firm. We are spread across 4 continents and 15 offices around the world. You can see the offices on the right side there on the screen. In the US, we mainly operate out of our Silicon Valley office. That's our headquarters here. We deliver solutions from concept to design and deploy and scale with the end game in mind. That's our motto. Over the years, 15 plus now, we've delivered 1,200 projects and have been recognized by customer over and over for our contributions. We have won a number of awards in the process. What we specialize in is design, engineering, data, and AI. So those are the pillars or the foundation of what we do. We have pioneered human-machine interface designs, and along the way have bagged several pretty prestigious awards. As a matter of fact, the topic of the day today comes from that very competency capabilities that we have created over time. We understand how to build human-machine interfaces pretty well, and that has fed into what we're about to discuss today. All right? So that's STAR. One more slide, and then I promise I'll come back to the topic of the day. So what we do in the healthcare life sciences world, how would we support our customers in the healthcare life sciences? So the engineering, design, data, and AI services I spoke about, they essentially translate into these 4 offerings for the industry. First, I mentioned we take a lot of pride in the human-machine interfaces. So with that capability, we can help organizations build digital therapeutics and companion apps, software as a medical device, software in medical device. And these are essential digital health solutions that support therapy adherence, symptom tracking, patient monitoring, so on and so forth. End of the day, they foster stronger patient-provider relationships. And they're not only used in the day-to-day care settings, but also essential for decentralized clinical trials in the pharma world. Next on the right, from left to right, the second box, it's data interoperability. In order to turn patient data into actionable insights and enabling personalized treatment plans, it's important that the data is interoperable with our capabilities that revolve around HL7 and FHIR standards. We enable these solutions such that if it is pharma or if it's any other healthcare settings, we allow to integrate the data coming from EMR, EHR systems and the healthcare practice systems like practice management systems. Then on the right further, then we build scalable health tech cloud native platforms used by providers, clinical sites, medtech companies, so on and so forth, and integrate them with their existing systems to make sure there is a smooth care delivery and operational efficiency. Last but not the least, on the rightmost side, is our AI-powered regulatory and compliance offering. Absolutely essential to everything on the first three left, the three boxes I just talked about. Compliance first is our approach to every solution we build and ensure that our customers have a smooth road ahead of them as they go live with those solutions. So as to jump into today's topic now, I mentioned earlier that I'll be conducting two polls. So let's start with the first poll. I want to check the audience in the meeting room. I want to see which part of the industry you belong to, you represent. If you don't mind, take 10 seconds, please respond to the poll. Okay. All right, let me share the results. So it appears that the majority of the attendees are from the medtech, health tech, therapeutic side, and some from diagnostic lab. All right, let's move on. That'll help me now share, when I share some of the stories, tailor my messaging. All right, so today we're going to see how we're going to harness the power of AI and agentic AI to better engage patients across any and all settings where patients interact with digital interfaces. Of course, there is no shortage of AI solutions in the healthcare around us. We see it around, we quite a few around us nowadays. They're used in a variety of ways today to drive efficiencies, cutting costs, assisting clinicians, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, most of those solutions, I would argue, are driving more and more digital solutions to patients, and they are reducing and many times removing the human component in that equation. What you will see different today, and I believe it's very unique, is how we can use AI to make the digital interactions more human. That's the essence of what we're going to talk today. We will use the solutions uses generative AI, agentic AI, et cetera, to reshape those in-patient interactions with the health systems. I'll mention examples of the concepts, and they can be applied to, by the way, clinical workflows, medical devices, on and on. So one more thing to remember is, while we are focusing our discussion today around patient as a context, the same technology can be easily applied to any user interaction across any industry. So I mentioned the solutions we will discuss are based on generative AI. We know generative AI is used to generate all sorts of content based on the user's prompt, right? That reminds me to share with you a quote. And I found this very profound. I came across this quote when I attended CES earlier this year along with Martin. It was part of one of the keynote speeches. Greg Brockman, president, chairman, co-founder of OpenAI. He said on the stage, we are moving to a world where human attention and human intent becomes the most precious resource. And now why did this resonate with me? So let me explain. If you think of what happens when you interact with ChatGPT, for example, we'll take that because Greg is from ChatGPT, OpenAI. It follows your prompt and provides you with the output. More often than not, you will find, even though you did not provide the full context for your prompt, it does a pretty good job of accurately gleaning what you had in mind when you provided that prompt. And when it responds, it doesn't stop there. It holds your attention, engages you as a user further, and tries to get deeper in your head. And that is what Greg means. The competition today is about how to maximize that human attention and understand human intent. And it is precisely that quality of AI we will look to exploit and harness in the solution today. So to illustrate my point further, let's turn our attention to some real life stories. So a question for all of you as you go through these stories, carefully understand or try to understand what is common, what is different with each of these stories. Okay, each story is about a patient, how he or she interacts with the digital health interface, aka portals, apps, etc. And in each patient journey, there is a patient who may be diagnosed with a condition, maybe undergoing a treatment, and so on and so forth, and is interacting with the caregiver through that digital interface. And they need to interact with the digital therapeutics, care management platform, portals, what have you, right? So let's go through them. And by the way, before I share the stories, the names in the stories are absolutely fictitious. Any resemblance is just coincidence. Make sure I point that out. So here's story number one. It is about Luca. It's a 7-year-old boy with low literacy and a short attention span. Completely normal for a 7-year-old boy, needing simple, highly visual guidance. Make sense? Completely in line with the age one would expect. Let's go to story number two. Mr. Bauer. He's a 79-year-old. He has hand tremors, visual limitations, again, very age-appropriate challenges, and also has a low digital familiarity, but remains cognitively sharp. Again, some of these stories have been carefully written to highlight few things. I'm hoping you are starting to grab those unique nature of each story. Story number three is about Anna, a 27-year-old who deals with anxiety spikes, and dyslexia, requiring multimodal guidance and simple information processing. Again, we have seen these cases in our personal lives. I'm sure you will relate to them. Story number four, Thomas, the 58-year-old, highly motivated, no impairments, demands accurate, structured, intellectually complex information. Yeah. So again, I'm sure these looks very familiar to you. We have encountered them in our families, in our people around us, etc., etc. So what's common or what is similar across each of these four stories? Again, I'll give you 5 seconds to quickly read through them. My question is, do you see any pattern in each of these stories? Let me add a bit of a hint. I've color coded some attributes of each of these stories with 2 different colors. The first color identifies the cause, and the second color, orange, identifies the implications of that cause, right? So each patient is different. That's essentially the pattern. That's what I'm trying to emphasize on. Now, interesting part is each patient that you can see, they carefully, because they carefully chose the stories for sure to bring out the contrast in them, they are very different from each other. And it's not just the age or the gender or a condition that's the most obvious difference. It's how the patient consumes or wants to consume or likes to consume the information, how they interact with the digital world. Now, wouldn't it be great if the systems we design take that into account and adapt to those unique nature of their consumption styles? The reason I say they are not very obvious for most of us who design systems today is because we are trained to instinctively treat each of our users as just a patient, and that's it. We rarely go beyond that thinking. We never stop to think how does the specific condition, a background or a liking or for that matter even the generational gap can affect their ability to consume information that we're trying to exchange with them. Hope you agree with me. How often do you see this in the clinical around us? I've never seen an application that factors in all these things. Now, in spite of those differences, the systems and platforms, applications we use, each of them treat every patient the same. The interesting part is we collect a lot of information about the patient, the user, whether it's in the EMR, EHRs, or in other ways, but they rarely influence the behavior of the system. So, of course, it decides how the treatment options change, but that's where it ends. And it results in all sorts of issues that we see. Now, you may be wondering, what's the solution? What am I hinting towards? Am I suggesting that there should be an interface for Luca, a different interface for Mr. Bauer, one for Anna, and then one for Ms. Thomas? In other words, should there be as many interfaces as the systems, applications, platforms, as number of patients? And not just stop at that. Could or should that interface dynamically, depending on the need of the patient in that moment, adapt and provide the best possible interface on the fly? Sounds unimaginable, right? Well, maybe not. Let's see. So, in case you're wondering, when I refer to patient interfaces, patient system interfaces, what am I referring to? I want to make sure that we are all on the same page here. So, as an example, a remote patient monitoring platform like Teledon would be a very classic digital interface that I'm referring to. Chronic condition disease management applications like Glucose, where we are monitoring, managing diabetes. Post-surgical recovery monitoring apps like Get Well, very important for making sure surgeons are connected, doctors are connected with the patients while they are discharged and doing rehab at home. Patient engagement care coordination apps like MyChart, something we use practically on an everyday basis. Patient-reported outcomes, very important for, especially in the clinical trials scenarios. And then patient registries, another example, which are a collection of all patient-related data for a particular condition. So what are some of the most common challenges, issues we face across this healthcare spectrum? I made a case where current system interfaces fail. hopefully we are all on the same page there now. But before we set out to change the patient interfaces, let us define how big the problem it is. Make sure that we are focusing on the right problem. What is the magnitude of it? So I mentioned earlier about all sorts of issues we face with the healthcare spectrum. Let's see if there's a correlation in those issues and the stories we just walked through. I'll walk you through some examples of these issues. Depending upon which sector you are from, I know majority of you are from medtech, as you said earlier in the earlier poll, you will find some of these very familiar. They are color-coded to show the prevalence in the different subsectors. So here we go. So let's start with the pharma and biotech for now. Patient recruitment retention is considered the single most factor that delays 80% of the clinical trials, costliest part of the entire drug discovery journey. When I talk to pharma and biotechs and CROs, this is the single most issue on their mind and the solutions they look for. Continuing on, so let's extend this to real world context now. When new drugs and therapies are, it's critical for the success of the drugs to make sure they are not missing any trial data, patients are not burnt out, and they stay through the trial, right? Health literacy, patient safety, medication adherence. Again, very important in a real world for clinical trials. Let's then turn our attention to now provider space. So diagnostic errors, hospital readmissions, avoidable ER visits. Where the care delivery and commercial viability of these days with outcome-based reimbursements, they depend on the quality of care. They depend on reducing the number of errors. They depend on reducing the hospital readmissions and reducing the ER visits. So it's not just a matter of patient care, it's also commercial viability of many of the companies, because their reimbursements depend on these reducing these errors. And coming to the payer side of the house, where healthier the patient, the fewer the claims. So obviously there is an economic incentive. Now, all these can be achieved only through consistent patient education, awareness of holistic health, care outcomes, and reimbursement issues, reducing the reimbursement issues. All these are paramount to controlling the cost and ensuring member satisfaction. And last but not the least, it's the patient himself or herself, the biggest stakeholder in the entire ecosystem. She must feel that they can trust the system as a whole, get the equal treatment regardless of their socioeconomic status, and they feel satisfied with the whole system as a whole, right? So what is remarkable about all these challenges and issues? Is there a common thread? So the experts have analyzed, and there is one single thread that weaves through all these issues, and that's poor patient engagement or lack of it. Now, the reason I pointed this out to make sure that we understand the magnitude of the problem before we try to solve it, right? So now let's understand the magnitude in terms of, how much difference does it make? So I call these as modern healthcare truths. So let's do another quick poll to see how many of you find these facts shocking. I'll give you 30 seconds, maybe a minute, because these are a bit more wordy here. Would love to get your feedback. There's no right or wrong answer here, obviously. Quite interesting. I'll wait for a few more seconds. I realize it's a lot of information to read through. Nice. Okay. All right, I'll share the results. So as you can see, the answers are all over the map, which is completely understandable. What I find most interesting is all of you agree, or most of you agree, that one size fit all is not a very good solution. And there is a realization that the success rate can go up dramatically by using age-friendly designs. Excuse me. Very interesting. So thank you. Thank you for that poll. Let me move to the next slide here. So the reason I put this poll out there is because I wanted to share with you what is my perception. So for me, the economic and the health toll really shocked me. It's the $300 billion, a lot of money, which could be better used for care. And most importantly, the lives, 125 lives annually lost or threatened because of the poorly designed systems or designed for average user. To me, regardless of what resonated with you, there is a huge economic and health consequence, and as a result, incentive to work on this problem, to solve this problem. So we established the magnitude of the problem also now. We defined the problem, we identified in detail across the sectors, and now we have the magnitude. So let's go to the solution now. So obviously patient interface matters. We must be moving towards living apps. The static apps no longer work, right? So welcome to Human Agentic Interaction model. Let me define it briefly what it is, the functional side of it, right? So as I mentioned, it's before I say that, so it's what it is. A human agentic interaction model is a framework. It's an agentic framework. It understands users' intent in that moment. Based on that, it takes actions in real time, designs, deploys that interface, multimodal interface, to collaborate with the users. That collaborate is also equally important because the interface may even change over time with the same user, because no 2 days are the same for us. So how does it do it? It does it in 3 distinct parts. First, the perception. Just as the name suggests, model understands who the user is, what his or her intent is. Remember the intent I talked about earlier, Greg's comment? What his or her needs are. And this is where data interoperability plays a key role. So not only there is a data one can glean from the systems where it is already persistent, but it can also glean from the behavior, the emotional interface with the system, the friction, the hesitation, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. So that's the perception. Second is reasoning. So based on the perceived requirements, it draws a conclusion on what should the user interface look like. And then finally, take the action. This is where the agentic AI is a set of different agents come together to define the user interface. So during the entire process, it remains in the confines of the ethical and the legal compliance boundaries, which are also maintained by the AI agents. Because it's important, whatever interface we build has to be ethically, legally compliant, maintain the privacy and the data and then the safety of the data. So to summarize, we are no longer designing interfaces for users. We are designing systems that design the tailored interfaces for the user in real time. All right, let's see it in action. Martin, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Mahesh. I'm going to demonstrate you now how this can look like a practical experience level. You might recognize that these are the same 4 profiles you have seen before: Luca, Mr. Bauer, Anna, and Thomas. And on the right-hand side, you see the repeated short description. What I've added here is some diagrams which have a couple of dots, and each of these dots is something we would call a dimension. So these dots actually describe what makes out a person and their needs of interaction. So these curves are quite different because it's different persons, and all of them have different needs of how their user interaction, how their interface should look like. Now, I want you to focus on the 2 lower ones, Anna and Thomas. Remember, Anna is 27-year-old graphic designer, and she and Thomas share the same medical condition, which is Crohn's disease. Anna suffers from anxiety spikes, when it comes to food. Will this food trigger a flare? Will this food trigger a condition, a medical condition worsening? And unfortunately, she has also dyslexia, so she needs short and crisp passages and more visual interface. And then we have Thomas, again, suffering from Crohn's disease, but he's medically stable and he's highly motivated, and he is down to detail, right? He loves to understand everything down to the smallest bits and pieces, wants to have very accurate, specific information. Now, what our human agentic interaction model can do is to take these these dots, the dimensions, and create a specifically tailored user interface on the fly. And that's what I'm going to show. So if you want to see the interface for Anna, push the button. Sorry. Wait a little. And here's the app, which is tailored for Anna. You can see it's a bit playful. It's visual. It has warm colors. It has emojis. It has functionality about hydration. It has a functionality to track the food, like saying I had lunch, soup. Sorry, 1 bowl of soup, and then this could be, you see here, is tracked so that she can later backtrack if there's any correlation with her medical, with her well-being and the medical condition. There's also a food scanner. You can scan the barcode, and the app gives a hint whether it sees any specific risk about eating this specifically, this kind of food. And in case there might be an anxiety attack, there's a mood support functionality here, which explains what is going on, helping her to calm down. So this reflects her needs. You see it's short texts, more visually driven, no long passages to read, very easy, simple to use, a little bit playful, and a certain visual style. Now, if you come to Thomas, who has the same daily needs, the interface looks very different. It's driven by details, by charts, by numbers, very detailed input. It has, though, the same functionality. Again, tracking food, but as Thomas likes in detail, it's already broken down to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you enter lunch, you can see already the level of detail. 250-gram steak, which, I don't know, 130 calories, lots of carbs. Don't take the values for real. I'm just guessing, right? So, and this goes into the food log. Also food scanner. But as you see as a result, it's not giving a general, it gives a very detailed analysis about the potential risks. So a lot of sugar, cacao pulver is no risk, milk, medium, you name it. And then there is the charts. Again, very detailed. It can even create a report to be sent to the doctor or for Thomas to be looked at. So, summarizing, 2 people, same medical journey, but very individually tailored and created interfaces to make it work for them in the most optimum way. And I would like to ask you to take over now again presentation, Mahesh, to go through the 2 slides, which will give you a bit more detail about how this actually works.
Okay. All right, everybody can see my screen again?
Not yet. Yeah. Here we go.
Okay, all right.
So if you go one more, exactly. So what's the main difference of what I just showed to you and what Mahesh explained earlier? What you see on the left-hand side is that usually one application is being deployed or used 1,000 times. So 1,000 users use the same application. There is a certain way of customizing the app, a little bit of look and feel, but whether it's visual, whether it's textual, whether it's audio, or whether it's even haptical with vibrations, is predefined. There's not much choice. What we have shown and what we believe in is the other way, that each person gets its own application, meaning we're talking about 1,000 applications for 1,000 people. And each application is different and distinct, and over time can be adjusted. So this is a major difference, and this is only possible now with the newest developed technology, that these apps can be actually created within minutes. The only reason we have the left side set up is that it was very expensive and took a lot of time to build a single application. But we are beyond this point now. And if you would go to the next one, Mahesh.
Sure.
Thank you. This is a more technical view of how it actually works. So we need input, of course. In order to create the app, we need information about the patient, which is the patient data, and what is the treatment plan. And it's important to emphasize here that these two green boxes are not AI generated. So the actual treatment decision is still with the doctor. It's not AI. What AI does is takes this information, feeds it via the Human Agentic Interaction model to create an application, which is then deployed to the user. So the platform is managing thousands and thousands of applications for each patient individually. And the HAI model is the secret sauce, which can translate the information about the patient into the interaction of the application. And with this, back to you, Mahesh.
All right, thank you. All right. So let's quickly summarize how it is done. How does that work? Martin, you want to cover this one, how it's done quickly, or do you want me to?
Yeah, okay. So what the platform is going to use is what we call multi-agent. So we have multiple agents for multiple tasks to be done, basically translating the input into the interaction principles, then implementing the interaction principles, namely building the app. We refer to all our experience and knowledge of our partners about the medical domain, health tech, what are patterns, what are things, do's and don'ts. And as Mahesh mentioned, we also rely on the safety compliance part of it, as mentioned. What we foresee as a maximum possible impact is that we have significantly reduced cognitive load for the user. As the interface is tailored to the needs, you don't have to ignore all the stuff you're not interested in. You just get what you need. That also speeds up the onboarding significantly and reduces the support calls quite a lot. We also see from experience of well-designed user interfaces that you have less user errors and you have a faster adoption. It's very simple, you know it, right? If you find an app which you like, you use it. If you're forced to use an app you don't like because it does not fit your needs, it's pretty hard to actually use it and to adhere to it.
Thank you, Martin. All right, so let's do a quick recap. We'll come to Q&A soon. So core capabilities, as Martin walked us through, it's adaptive UIs, it's a multi-agent workflows, device to cloud intelligence. Obviously, there is an applications or set of applications or platform behind the scene that makes things possible. And then all this in the confines of regulated data privacy safety framework. So a number of use cases come to mind. Again, we already talked about different applications earlier. Now, with the added intelligence, one can imagine having a smart patient support, a digital CRO, a CRO that completely sits in a box, intelligent medtech device companions. So companions are really tailored for your specific need, right? And the list goes on. So before I wrap up, I have to share this interesting comment that was made by a Nobel laureate from 2025 for economics. And he was asked a question, is there a promise that huge advances in AI will lead to growth? And his view, interestingly, you will notice, coincides with what we are talking about here.
But what AI will allow us to do is it's basically computing powers on steroids that will allow us to do things that we couldn't ever do before. I'll give you one example, and that's the personalization of education. I'm looking at a bunch of students in my classes at Northwestern. I don't know enough about each student. I know their name if I'm lucky. Now, with AI, in principle, education can be tailor-made for each individual student. So getting rid of essentially one-size-fits-all services in education, in medicine, in justice is going to be an enormous step forward for the human race. That's a great contribution of AI.
So, as Professor Joel Mokyr says, one-size-fits-all paradigm now can be completely changed to now an application that is tailored or a solution that is tailored for the user. I'll end at that. I promised about the bonus at the end earlier in the session. So please join us. We are offering a discovery workshop with the STAR team to explore how HAI can be of help to you in your particular situation, your particular use case. Be happy to dive deeper. Please take a look at the QR code, point to it, and send us information. We'll be happy to take it forward. I'll stay on this for 5 seconds. All right. Okay. With that, let's jump to Q&A. All right, let me see what we have in the Q&A section. All right, so there's first question here. I'll read it out loud. You mentioned that we currently deploy the same app 1,000 times for 1,000 different patients. In practical terms, how does the HAI model decide that a patient needs a highly visual interface versus a structured and complex one in real time? Martin, you want to?
Yeah.
Take it?
So the answer is quite simple. The model has been trained to be capable of doing this. And the training experience and the training input comes from 17 years experience of STAR of designing user interfaces and doing user research and being able to understand which of these dots or dimensions I mentioned earlier relate to what needs of a person of interaction model. So these dimensions indicate some needs, and this is backed up by a lot of data and the research studies we have done. And this is all brought into the model to come up with the proper design.
Very good. Thank you. All right, I'll go to the next question. Healthcare providers are already facing massive burnout. Does this real-time interface design add more work for the clinical team, or is the AI application creator fully autonomous? So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Martin. I think the answer is very clear, but yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, of course, it will not create more work for the clinical team, but it should reduce the work. The creation part is fully autonomous, and it should be working in a way that the apps are deployed and there's no additional work required from the clinical team. So no additional support with the app itself as a technical thing. But also it will actually reduce the work of the clinical team as patients adhere better to their journey, to the treatments, to the medication. Clinical teams will have less work to do in order reminding them or fixing situations and problems when they didn't adhere to the procedure.
Right. So I'll jump to one other question, which may be a little bit related to this, Martin, and that is, so you referred to the HAI model as an engine that understands the intent. Does this engine sit on top of our existing platform, like MyChart, for example, or a specific remote patient monitoring platform? Or does it require us to rebuild our engine, our entire digital infrastructure? What do you think?
It's meant to be complementary to existing infrastructure. I'm not sure if it will actually sit directly on top of an application, as this might have several technical and also commercial challenges, but it will access the data which is in an existing infrastructure to build, maintain, and deploy these applications.
Okay. Very good. All right, let me go to the next question. How long will it take to get an app generated for a patient? On which devices can this app be used? Smartphone, a tablet, or a laptop?
So it will take only a few minutes. And it's basically driven mostly by the time it needs to be deployed on the device. We foresee it will work on any device, smartphone, laptop, tablet, smartwatch. We even found a way to be smart enough to basically bypass the approval cycle of these app stores. You might know that if you want to push an app to the App Store and, from Apple, it goes under a review process, which can take weeks. Of course, this isn't acceptable. We have found a way to deploy this very fast within minutes.
Okay, great. Will the interaction of the app adjust itself over time to the needs of the patient?
It can, but only if the user consents to these changes. Nothing will happen out of the blue.
Excellent. I think that's a very critical point to note. Given the regulatory environment that healthcare industry operates in, whether it is HIPAA, whether it is DPPR, whether it is AI EU Act, or for that matter, even FDA regulations, all those require that we use the data provided by the users in a ethical way, in a way that is transparent, in a way that's auditable, and consents are a really important part of it. I would probably go a step further. There may be a need, I foresee a need that users may even have to be given an ability to explain why something looks different, so that there is a very clear understanding and transparency about what changed, why it changed. Yeah. So another question here. As a medtech provider, we don't have clinical conditions of our users. How might your platform work with this constraint?
Yeah,
So,
there's a couple of ways to
Go ahead.
to address this. So one is we can fill the gaps by just asking the patient or people who are knowledgeable about the patient. And it's only very few questions which needs to be answered. If not all answers are available, the system will default to something which seems to be most appropriate to the medical case and to the patient journey. One use case, for example, is that also your clinician or your general practitioner might have some information which could be easily fed, maybe even in a manual way or in a verbal way, like a quick phone call, talking to the system and explaining.
Right. Okay. Very good. Here's another question. Also, would your platform be able to get insights from the algorithms to use within the HAI to custom make the interface?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. So
Okay, let me repeat. Yeah.
If the
You want me
question
to
is
repeat?
whether we can use output of algorithms to influence how the interfaces are built, the answer is simply yes. So our model is trained on all the experience and data we have, but it can be enhanced with any additional information on the fly to influence the user experience or the app which is being created.
Right. Yeah, I was going to add perhaps it's also, as I said earlier, it's important to have these insights, or at least the reasoning, as I described on the slide, documented in some form for auditing. So there's always at least some information available about what did the model suggest, what reasoning it created.
Yeah, maybe Mahesh, I highlight one topic which
Sure.
might be interesting for the audience as well, is that the way the platform is using AI is not directly giving recommendations about treatments or drug administration, etc. So the AI is creating a user interface to provide information about how the journey should be shaped. And what the journey is and what the drug administration is still defined by humans and medical trained people. So technically speaking, this app might not be classified as software as a medical device, which is giving a lot of more freedom and flexibility how to design this and how to deploy them. This is an important distinction, right? So the AI is not going to decide, take 3 pills of this per day. The app is going to create an interface which reminds you to take your drugs as prescribed, for example.
That's right. Good point. Very good point. So it does not change the clinical context of the interaction. It only is the interaction itself. Very good. All right. I think we answered all questions.
No, there's one new one.
Oh, there's one.
more.
Okay, so I just saw. How much of the PHI, PII gets stored in HAI model, and how are the liabilities managed?
Yeah, so the persistence storing this PHI and PI is up to the well-established systems you have already and you're using. They are only temporarily fed into the HAI model to create the user experience and to write the app, and then it's forgotten. So it's not stored or persisted in any way. It remains in all the systems which are compliant, certified, and assessed to deal with this kind of data.
Right. Okay, absolutely. And then I would add, in case if the user is uncomfortable of allowing AI to use the PHI to tailor the interface, they can opt out of it. And then the system could then default to, as you said earlier, certain set of templates, or further, it could use only the behavioral aspects gleaned from the interaction itself as an input for changing the interface. Yeah. All right. I think we are at the end of the questions. I don't see any more on that list. Well, in that case, we will close the session. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this webinar. We hope it was meaningful, it was useful, and hopefully it will help you address some of the issues I discussed about earlier. Please reach out for any additional questions. And as we offered to offer a workshop, we're happy to get into a lot more details in specific use